Marshall Chriswell with us here this morning for Marshall Law. Marshall, we have talked a lot down through the years about estates and the need for folks to have a will or some sort of estate plan in place. It's a very, very important aspect of your life. One of the aspects of that, though, is who's going to be your executor, and what goes into choosing an executor for your estate, and what are the duties for that person. And so let's talk about that this morning. It's really important, isn't it? The person that you choose to do that job.
Yeah, it's a hugely important decision, and I think sometimes people don't put enough thought into it. I very often get folks that come in and say, well, I want everything divided equally between my three sons, and John's the oldest, so he'll be the executor. And that's a terrible way to choose an executor. Whenever we're looking at how we're going to select someone to be the executor of your estate, I always talk about two criteria. One is trustworthiness, right? Somebody that is going to do the job and to be honest and to be fair, and to follow the law and do the things that they're supposed to do, and that you have faith that they'll do that. And then also competency, because all of us have people in our lives that we know that are as honest as the day is long, but probably can't balance a checkbook or handle paperwork or be diligent to deal with the administrative tasks that you've got to do to be an executor. So people have different skill sets, and so you've got to think about that as well.
Well, that being the case, some folks will say, well, that disqualifies me. This, whatever it was that you just said, this part of it or that part of it, I'm not that expert in this or in that, and therefore I can't do it. And it's not that you're saying that at all, because the attorney is going to be who guides you through that process, correct?
That's right. So there's, you want to look at those basic criteria when selecting someone, but also with the understanding that they're going to have the support of an attorney, an accountant, other professionals that can help them along the way. So that's certainly there, but at a base level, you want somebody that's going to be honest and somebody that's going to be competent.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned somebody that has multiple children who are involved, and the idea of maybe not sibling rivalry, but somebody getting their feelings hurt simply because Dad chose me over them or them over me. That can't really enter into what is a really very important decision, can it?
No, you can't pick the executor based on will somebody's feelings be hurt. Like I said, you pick the executor based on your feeling about their ability to do the job. Now, another consideration, of course, is the family dynamics. I'm always asking clients about, do your kids get along? Where do they live? Where are they geographically? And what are the age gaps? And just getting a feel for the family dynamic, because it is important that all things being equal between the children as far as trustworthiness and competence. We want a child that's going to communicate, have some transparency with the others, right, or with the other beneficiaries of the estate, if we're not talking about children, and to do their best to make sure that the beneficiaries get what's coming to them within the bounds of the will or of state law. But having that openness and making sure that they communicate as far as, this is where we are in the estate, right? I opened the estate today. Hey, we've got, a lot of bills. Mom had a lot of debt we've got to pay. And just letting them know along the way what's going on, because I think there's nothing more frustrating for someone who's the beneficiary of an estate to kind of feel like they're in the dark and nobody's telling them what's going on, because as we've talked about before, it's a long process, right? I mean, an estate administration is, generally at minimum a year of work, and sometimes longer. So that keeping the beneficiaries apprised of what's going on is really important.
Well, a couple of the things that you just mentioned there were really what would make the nuts and bolts of the job. What are the jobs, the duties that somebody who is an executor can expect?
Sure. And of course, you're going to work, as you said, working with a lawyer through these things. It makes it easier. But you've got to number one, you've got to ascertain. All right, did mom or dad did they have a will? Does it name me as executor as I expected it does? Sometimes I get situations where mom or dad says, "Hey, I've got a will and you're named the executor." Well, we can never find it. But you've got to ascertain, do they have the will? Once they do, it's got to be registered with the court, and the executor has to be sworn in to faithfully perform the necessary duties to administer the estate. And then once that part is done, kind of the work begins, right? You've got to ascertain what assets the deceased person had. So you've got to find bank accounts, insurance policies, make sure that you have a firm understanding on what real estate interests they might have held. All of these kinds of things, retirement accounts, personal property, personal assets, from household contents to vehicles to other things. So you have to ascertain what those are, and you've got to secure them. You've got to preserve them because they may need to be, you may need to sell them to pay debts and things like that. So that's kind of the beginning of the job.
Well, that being the case, and all of those different things that you just said, would it not be incumbent upon A, the person whose will it is, B, the attorney working with them, and C, the executor to be, to do a lot of this groundwork beforehand so that everybody knows exactly what to do when the time comes? Absolutely.
And this is a conversation that I always have with clients who that I do estate planning work for, just simple questions. Okay, where are you going to keep your will and your power of attorney documents and other important things? Where do you keep those? So that and I may even put that in my notes so that if someday somebody comes and asks and says, "Hey, mom passed and I don't know where her will is," I can go back in my notes and say, "Well, let's check here." I like to get people thinking about that, right? Where am I going to keep them, and what other things am I going to keep with my will? Am I going to keep copies of my life insurance policies? Yeah. Good idea. Funeral and burial instructions or pre-planning documents. I always like to have people keep a copy of each statement from their, a copy of one statement from each of their bank accounts, retirement accounts, other financial accounts, so that there's just one statement from each in with those things, so somebody can see very clearly, okay, that mom had checking accounts at PNC, Indiana First, and S&T Bank. Okay, I know that now. We know that. It just makes things much easier. Instructions for what you'd like to happen with personal property, household contents, and things like that. If you're leaving informal instructions, so all kinds of things that you can. That you can leave behind along with your will it's really going to be helpful for your executor.
I would think as well that it would therefore be very, very important that before that time comes, whoever is going to be moving forward and being the executor would need access to those accounts, especially if you're the last survivor of a spousal relationship.
Right. So one thing that I often recommend, if it makes sense for the family, is that the person that we're making the executor of your estate, let's consider also making that person your financial power of attorney, so that if you're you spend the latter part of your life and you're maybe sick or can't manage your own financial affairs, you've got power of attorney documents to say, okay, my son John is my power of attorney. He can access and manage my bank accounts and write checks and pay bills and do all the things he needs to do. But then when I would pass, John becomes my executor, and there's continuity there, so that John knows, okay, these are the bills that Mom paid every month. This is where her bank accounts are. I've already figured all this stuff out, and I don't have to hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Deposit boxes too.
Yep.
That's something very, very important to take care of beforehand.
Safe deposit boxes. Make sure people know that you have safe deposit boxes. I find often that people have them, and maybe they've had them for a long time, and they're at banks that are other than where they normally do their banking, and so we don't find out about them until much later. Also, don't put your will and your power of attorney documents and things like that in the safe deposit box. Unless the child that's an executor, unless they're a joint owner on the box, because if they're not, which most of the time they aren't, it becomes very difficult to get access to the box to get the will or get the power of attorney. So it's much easier if they're in a home safe or a filing cabinet or something like that.
A lot to do, a lot of preparation that could really ease some of the work that you have to do, but in the end can be a very beneficial thing. But you have to work with an attorney to get all of this done if you want to get it done right. Marshall, if somebody wants you to be the person who helps them through this process, what should they do?
Sure, you can call my office at 724-465-5826. You can stop and see us. I'm in the old R&P Cole headquarters here at 655 Church Street in Indiana, or just go online to the website, www.westernpalawyer.com.
Very good. Thanks, Marshall.
Thanks, Todd. Take care.
You too.